Hi, I'm Tom Miggott from Tom Miggott Photography. You've heard many photographers, including myself, saying that you should be the sole decision maker when taking an exposure. And that is because you are the only one who knows what factor is the most important in your scene, whether it's the depth of field or the time value. That's the very reason why we recommend that you use the aperture priority mode or the shutter priority mode or the full manual mode. The third factor of the exposure triangle, the ISO, is the least creative one. So what if we could actually entrust our camera to choose the ISO value for us? Well, that would bring two questions in mind. The first one is, how can you make sure that your camera won't increase the ISO too rapidly? And the second question would be, how can we make sure that the ISO value won't be through the roof and resulting in an image being unusable at the end because of the noise? Well, the answer depends on the camera that you're going to be using. Some cameras will let you specify the slower shutter speed before the ISO is being increased. And that's the case of the Nikon D90, for example. But other camera won't let you specify that, but will let you specify the maximum ISO value that the mode will choose. And that's the case of my Canon 60D. I can set the limit at 1600, for example. So I know, because I know that beyond that value I start having noise in my exposures, so I can limit it. Or the camera will let you specify both, and that's the case of the Canon 5D Mark III and others. Cameras that don't let you specify the minimum time value will often follow an algorithm based on the slower shutter speed will be 1 over your focal length multiplied by 2, which means that if you actually shoot with a focal length of 105mm, it will consider that the slower shutter speed that you can use will be 1/200th of a second. My guess is that they base this algorithm on the fact that most cameras that do not have the ability to let you choose the shutter speed value are crop sensor cameras. So as you know, there is this rule of thumb for avoiding camera shake, which is you can handle your camera down to 1 over your focal length multiplied by the crop ratio. So on Canon would be 1.6, on Nikon would be 1.5. So multiplying that focal length value by 2 is rather safe. However, I do have a problem with this algorithm though, is that it does not take in consideration the use of some kind of image stabilization in your lens. So for example, my Canon 24-105 LIS USM lens, I know for a fact that if I use the IS, so the image stabilization feature, I can still handle my camera at 105mm down to 1/10th of a second. So 1/10th of a second versus the 1/200th of a second, that's a huge difference in terms of stop of light. So yes, the auto ISO mode will actually change more rapidly than I would actually like it to do. So why would you want to use an auto ISO mode in the first place? Well, on my experience, the reason why I started thinking about it is one day I was covering an event. It was inside. There were children and adults and all were walking around and so on. And I was really focusing on capturing the actions. And as often, I set my camera to aperture priority mode. I probably specified the aperture value being f4, the max aperture that my camera allows. And I let the camera choose the shutter speed according to the situation. The light condition changed slightly time over time because depending on the background, you know, behind my behind the subject, and because of the action was so, I had to focus on the action so constantly that I did not focus on what my shutter speed was. And so it's only when I went back to the computer afterwards that I realized that some of my shots were actually blurred because of camera shake. Yes, indeed, my shutter speed actually went below my limit for hand holding my camera, and I didn't think at the time of, you know, looking at my shutter speed and say, oh my gosh, it's too low, I need to increase my ISO. So I wondered if there was actually a mean for me to avoid such issue in the future when I do not have the time to think, oh, shutter speed is too low, I need to increase the ISO. And that's when I started trying and testing this auto ISO mode. I'm not saying this is perfect, and I think the great thing is to really know that this feature exists. Try it and figure out if it works for you. You can use this mode when you're on full manual or aperture priority or shutter priority, but to be honest, I do not see the value in using it in shutter priority mode, because all it will do is basically change constantly both your ISO and your aperture, and I don't really see the value. If I buy a lens that's going to be an f4 lens, I'm probably going to be using f4 most of the time, or 5.6. But anyway, that's another topic. Using it for a full manual mode, that does make some sense, because you could actually set up your both your shutter speed and your aperture. So let's say you want to the shallowest depth of field, you set up f4 for example, and then you know that because you're capturing people, let's say in a wedding, you know that if you use an aperture a shutter speed value, sorry, of 200 of a second, for example, that's going to be enough to freeze your subject. So if you specify those two factors, then you're going to be okay with the ISO going up and down, and you can set the threshold as you want. The only thing, of course, is to make sure that whatever value you decide for the shutter speed and the aperture, if the ISO was 100, you need to make sure that you're not overexposed. That would be the only thing. So that's pretty much all there is to say about this. This is just food for thought for you guys. Knowing that the feature exists, your camera comes with many automatic features, and when we say that you need to be the sole decision maker in taking the exposure, it does not mean that you need to do everything manual. It only means that you need to be aware of all the features that your camera comes with, and you make the decision of using such automatic feature or not. Until next time, this is Tommy God saying, if you like it, well, capture it, and maybe with the out of ISO mode. Ciao.